indie game garden.
Pierce Papke Pierce Papke is a creative who inspires me. He's a visual artist first and foremost, whose game making and storytelling chops show through in all he touches. I was first introduced to his work via an Instagram reel describing how his partner, Greta, supported him in 2025 while he was making his atmospheric detective game, Murder of King Lear. This connected with me, as my partner Jamie primarily supports our family while I do, well, whatever the heck this is. Jamie and I played King Lear for our other podcast, Bargain Bin. While we had questions about some of the game's rougher edges, there was a distinct vision and deep world building threaded throughout the game that I felt a distinct kinship with. Pierce updates Murder of King Lear regularly while working on a slew of other creative projects, including a book set in Darkway, a graphic novel set in Darkway, and another game called Ultra about trail running. You can keep up with these wonderful projects and more by visiting his website at ekpap.com. It's an honor to have Pierce on the show today. Pierce, thanks so much for being here. To start, I really need to hear more about your background as a creative person. I say that, make it a little more general than game designer, because I know you do a lot of other things and actually are potentially more interested or more passionate about visual art. So what drew you to visual art in the first place? How did the desire to make games come into the fold? And what's your journey been like as kind of an indie creative so far?
I was trying to come up with a good answer to this question because it's such a long answer, because it goes beyond just me as an individual. It also includes all the people who've contributed to my life, especially my family, and all the stuff that my family has done through the generations. My grandfather on my mother's side, he's an aerospace engineer, and he moved here from England to work at Boeing. He was always pretty technically minded, and that kind of manifested itself into him becoming an aerospace engineer. And then my granny, she was born in England at a time where really the only option for a woman was to be a stay-at-home mother. But she's probably one of the most creative storytellers I know. Growing up, we would go to ski at Stevens Pass near Seattle, and we'd go up on the chairlift together because she would ski with me. And on the chairlift, she would tell me stories of Pierce Rabbit, which she very fondly named after me. And I remember always looking forward to the next chairlift because she would continue the story. And it got to a point where some of her friends would sit on the chair with us to hear the story of Pierce Rabbit.
Aww.
And then my mother, she's very unique in that she's creative in many different aspects. She hopped careers quite a bit. She's worked as a firefighter. She's worked as a hairstylist. She's worked as a real estate agent. She's worked in law. And I think I have that a little bit in that I do hop around quite a bit, from like visual arts to game development to writing. That's just my mother's side. My father's side, my Oma and Opa were both very working class. They immigrated here from Germany, actually. And my Opa, he worked as a butcher at Albertsons, which is so funny because I'm vegetarian. His one and only grandson turns out to be vegetarian. And he, despite being kind of working class, he's one of the only people I know who made turntables from scratch. And he did that for 20 years. The entire time I knew him, he was making turntables. He had this whole workshop in his basement, and he'd sell them online for way cheaper than what they were worth. He'd sell them for like $500 when that was like the cost that covered the parts, so he could build the next one. And then my Oma, she also was kind of born in a time where she had the only option really was to be a stay-at-home mom. But I grew up with her always having a stack of crosswords and Sudoku and problem solving books. So she was always very mentally sharp. She was always doing some sort of puzzle, which I think she passed on to my dad, because my dad is really the artist in my family. He was the one who wanted to be kind of the Rembrandt. He wanted to make paintings for a living. And he started painting probably at the age of 6. In our living room, I have this kind of M.C. Escher sketch he did when he was 12 of this egg that he's holding that warps perspective around it. And the reason I'm talking about all this generational stuff is, I'll get to it a little bit later, but that's kind of the essence of what Darkway is about, which is what my game is, Darkway Murder of King Mir. Anyways, the picture he drew was of himself as a dog, which I didn't realize till after I made Murder of King Mir that I made a dog game, and he made that drawing of himself as a dog. He went to community college to get an art associate's degree, but about a year in, I think, he got hired as a drafter at Boeing, and then kind of started bouncing around the aerospace industry and eventually became an engineer. And that's how he met my mom, actually, because he worked at my grandfather's company, which he was an engineer at. And then he met my mom, who was his boss's daughter. So kind of a fun dynamic there. Anyways, all of these threads somehow coalesced into me as a child being very fascinated in world building and creating stories, probably because so much of my family just fed it to me. Like, I was raised on stories. I was raised on the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I was encouraged to draw. I was encouraged to make up worlds. And I also think I was an only child until I was about 12, and then I got a bunch of step siblings. I made these games that I could play with myself. I made Civic Mortality, which was a Dungeons and Dragons clone. That was a game you could play by yourself. So I played it outside in the woods, and I made a map of the woods around my house and just played this Dungeons and Dragons clone I made. In high school, I kind of became more of a leadership kid. I was in student government and all that. And I kind of put art out of my mind because it stopped being encouraged a little bit. My family was way more concerned with, how is Pierce going to make a living in this world? And so they really were encouraging me to either go down the aerospace route, do some form of work that has been proven to work by like my family. So most of high school, I didn't really think about it, and I kind of stopped making art, except for world building and writing and making maps. But I kind of did it as a hobby. And then when I graduated, I realized if I'm going to go to college, I need to major in something. And I chose education, which my family initially was not very happy about, because they were like, "You're going to be a teacher? What?" I got an after school teaching job, teaching Lego engineering. And I realized very quickly that I am not very passionate about classroom management. I did like teaching, and I did like building the Legos and coming up with all the concepts to teach, but the classroom management just was not my jam. And I'd gotten a scholarship from my college to take art classes because I submitted some of my world building stuff, and they were like, "Yeah, this is pretty good. You should take some art classes. We'll give you money to take them." And so when I ran out of options of what am I going to do if not education, I realized I had to take these art classes anyways, and I really enjoyed taking them. And my family has been creative since I can remember. Why not pursue art? My family was even less happy about that. My mom was pretty excited. I think my mom was pretty excited because she wanted to see my dad succeed in that, and he kind of just kept pursuing engineering. But my dad, strangely, was not excited. He, I think, saw my art skill, and because he was such an advanced artist, he didn't think I could do it. My paintings were pretty bad back then. I didn't really understand how to paint light and shadow or even do simple form. But I think, as with anything, learning is the key to getting better. And I think that was on my side. I mean, I have a very tenacious family, and I think they gave that to me. And I started out as a very bad artist and managed to become an okay one. I think that answers the full question. Sorry, it was such a roundabout answer, but
No. I appreciate you being like worried about my schedule or anything, but this is like kind of what I live for, to hear about this stuff. So
awesome.
You're filling my cup as
Cool.
much as it feels like you might be filling yours as well. But then just also, where did the coding or interest in games and computers come in?
Oh yeah. This kind of ties into one of your later questions. The summer between my freshman and sophomore year in high school, I was 15, can't remember the exact age. Did not have a summer job because I was too young. My parents left me at home because I was too old to like go to some summer school or something like that. And I was bored. I mean, I had step siblings at that point, but most of them were either working or at summer school, and I just didn't know what to do with my time. So I was like, what if I make a video game? That should be easy, right? I know how to use Game Maker Studio. I took a few Game Maker classes at school, and I started crafting this world for it, which I will answer in a later question about how I started developing Darkway. But the idea was video games are the ultimate form of media. Not only do they combine storytelling, they also combine visuals and cinematics and player agency. Video games are one of the only media where you can really get true presence, which is where the player gets so immersed into the world that if only for a split second, that world feels like it could be real. Which in books you have when you imagine the world, in movies you have when you watch the show, but video games even more so because you embody the character you're playing and you get this sense that you're in the world. And so I figured, why not try? I love video games. I would like to see if I can do it. And I still have that file on my computer. It's essentially a walking simulator. It's not really a game, but it was something. It was the beginning. And I mean, I've always been a gamer. I feel like that's most developers' answer. Like, you like the format, you like the media, and you want to tell a story in it.
Yeah. Were you like, did you have a specific console growing up, or was it kind of just everything?
My first console was a 1989 Game Boy, a DMG 001 or 01. And it was my dad's, and he had bought it in Japan in 1989 on a business trip. And he gave it to me when I was 2 years old. And I remember I had Super Mario Land or Super Mario World, one of those cartridges. And I could not get past the first level. And I think I tried for 2 years to get past the first level. And that's such an interesting thing because a lot of the people I've worked with in the games industry are kind of from that generation where their first console was a Game Boy. And they talk to me like, I don't know what that experience is like, sitting in the back of a car at night and you can't see the screen. So you're like trying to play as the street lights go by.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I know what that's like. And they're like, what? Aren't you like 25? And I'm like, yeah, but that was my first console.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I read on your website that you began world building for Darkway in high school, as you kind of mentioned. Yep. I would love to hear more about the world, what draws you to it, and like how it has evolved since your first ideas for it.
Yeah. Darkway initially began for that video game project that I started when I was like 14. And the idea behind it was I was frustrated that most fantasy and sci-fi worlds just used the default planet template or a map template. Everything was on a flat piece of paper. They were continents, there were water, which is fine. It's very Tolkien-esque, Middle-earth inspired. But I was frustrated because I thought fantasy could do more with the actual world part of the world building. So Darkway literally refers to not only the philosophy that the world is exploring, but also the physical structure. So currently in our world, particles have gravity because of some graviton particle that causes them to mass together in planets and suns and orbit one another. The idea I came up with for Darkway was, what if gravitons and gravity were not a part of particles, but rather a part of space? And they formed a sort of chain link through space that matter then coalesced around. So if you can imagine what neurons look like in a brain or bronchial tubes in a lung, that's literally what the Darkway is. It's these chain links of matter, of either water tubes or land tubes that connect these points of higher gravity where then land masses originate. So in Darkway Murder of King Mir, the game takes place on the Isle of Dogs. And it's in the city of Ink, which is on the edge of the Isle of Dogs, which is near the Darkway, which is literally a way through the dark expanse of the void space, because it's a tube of gravity that has water on it that you can sail on.
I see.
So that's literally what Darkway is. But then that, as I matured, I think matured as an artist, it became also a metaphor for what the stories in Darkway are about. I run a lot. Honestly, I think running coincides almost perfectly with when I started really world building a lot. I think I made that first game project when I started running for cross country in high school, like running in the summer to train. And now I run like every 2 to 3 days, just because I get most of my ideas on my runs. And I'm a little bit obsessed with this guy called David Goggins. I don't know if you know who David Goggins is.
No, I haven't heard of him.
He's this ultra marathoner who is also a inspirational speaker. He was a Navy SEALs guy. He's kind of intense. He's not for everyone, but one of his quotes is, when you push really hard, when you try to improve at something, and you get to this point where you have this door in your mind, and a lot of people don't want to open that door, because when you open that door, there's a tunnel, and it's a really dark tunnel where you can't see anything, and you're just surrounded by darkness. But if you have the courage to stay in that darkness long enough, your eyes will start to adjust to the darkness. And I think the quote is followed by, like, your body and mind always experience a little bit of suffering, but we get used to it over time. And the trick then is to grow alongside that, and to use that suffering as a means to become a better person. So I think I'm getting a little bit off topic here. The question, remind me of the question, sorry.
It was mainly just talking about how Darkway has evolved now that you've answered about the world.
Yeah, so I mean, I brought up my family at the beginning as well. I've been working to make Darkway something feasibly sci-fi. So a fantasy world that could fit within a stretched sci-fi bounds of our real world. Because what I'm trying to make Darkway into is essentially a place where every creature has heightened intelligence and consciousness. So that's why the game has anthropomorphic dogs. The dogs are literally the dogs of people in this world that have gained a certain level of sentience, so that they can essentially grow. I don't know if that makes sense. I can rephrase that.
That makes sense to me. And you're saying grow as like a society, correct?
Yeah. And in Darkway as well, there's a brief mention of these creatures called heralds. Heralds are humans.
Okay.
They're humans that are able to travel through the Darkway and drop in on memories of people who came before them, essentially to gain a heightened awareness of who they are and where they came from. The entirety of Darkway is based on conservation of information. So when we're here talking right now, constantly waves of light are being beamed down at us from the sun. And let's just imagine there's a human on Proxima Centauri, the star system. I think that's 4 light years away from us. If we look at that star system with a telescope, we don't look at it right now. We don't look at it as things are happening right now. We look at it as it's happening 4 years ago. So let's say there's a human on Proxima Centauri that's looking at us right now. That would be 4 years in the future. Technically, that's not happening anymore, but from their perspective, it is. And if they had some super telescope that could look inside our skull and the layers of our neurons, they could, in theory, have an echo of who we are as people, an actual brain of us. So the way that it works in Darkway to have these heralds and these dogs that are echoes of this world is it takes for granted this conservation of information and expands it to say, all right, what is happening to all of this information that is expanding out into space endlessly? Where does it go? Where do all these echoes of everyone that exists go? And I'm still working on figuring out how like interdimensional space would work. Like Darkway is obviously a 3-dimensional space. We're in a 3-dimensional space. I don't yet know how an echo from this 3-dimensional space would get to that 3-dimensional space, especially considering if we go off of string theory, there's technically every particle is technically folded up into 11 dimensions, which I've been researching, but still don't understand how that works. And if that is the case, could the Darkway be folded up into that? I don't know. This is me trying to figure out, this is me actively trying to figure out world building as well. So it's an unfinished world to a certain extent, but I think most good world building projects are. I mean, Tolkien was always writing more about how his world worked and making new languages and new histories. And there's many different types of world building too. Almost 5 years ago now, I met with the author of the Amulet series, which is a graphic novel series, Kazu Kibuishi. He was very intent that you would write the story before you do the world building, which, I mean, you can kind of tell with his books because they're all over the place. They're very Ghibli-esque in that
I see
something is possible and then it's not, and then something even bigger is possible. And it's like, how does this work? What are the laws of this world? And I think he's just bending them for the story. And then you have also people like Stephen King, who wrote the Dark Tower series, which is another huge inspiration for me.
Oh, cool.
The first Darkway book is pretty much a cipher of the drawing of the three, which is the second book in that series. He made the Dark Tower series, I think, on the fly as he was writing. Like, I don't think he knew exactly what the Dark Tower even was.
Right.
Yeah. There's many different ways to world build, and I think I'm trying to navigate which way I want to do it.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you're thinking through the, like, I guess, for lack of a better term, real world implications.
Yeah.
But then, you know, at any time, since it is ultimately fiction, like you can, even if you're not tweaking it as much as, you know, the author of the Amulet, like you said, there is that kind of play space where you can figure things out as you go, which is awesome. I feel like that leads to a lot of possibilities that are exciting for me as a fan, but maybe more stressful for you as a creator. We'll see. But you mentioned the Darkway book, or at least one of the books. And I just kind of wanted to, a little more generally, before we dive more into Murder of King Mir, which is the video game you just released, I would love to hear more about the Darkway books. I know of two. Are there more than that? Is that
There's
kind of
just two right now.
I gotcha. Tell us more about those.
One of them is a graphic novel that I have not worked on for a while because I did it as part of a self-imposed challenge to see if I could make a graphic novel in a week, and the answer was no, you cannot make a graphic novel in a week. I got decently farther. I think I got like 8-9 pages, which is more than my friends thought I could do.
That's amazing in itself.
Yeah, it's uncolored. It's just black and white. That graphic novel series covers the origins of the empire of dogs that you then find in Murder of King Lear. So before that graphic novel series is essentially just a bunch of city-states and kingdoms that are constantly warring with one another. And that graphic novel series, I hope, will cover how the Empire of Dogs came into existence. And then the book actually has a lot of thought and effort behind it. It's about 35,000 words. I know where I want it to go. The issue now is this is something that I don't think people talk about enough in fiction writing, and that's the cleverness and wittiness of characters to get out of situations or to solve situations. Because I think it's easy to impose problems upon fictional characters, but I think the real joy of a good book is those characters are very clever in coming up with solutions to those problems, and that it's entertaining to read. Which is one of the reasons I love the Dark Tower series so much, is because it's just problem after problem after problem with these crazy solutions you would never expect. So I've been trying to mimic that, but it's so hard to come up with good solutions to self-imposed problems. That book follows a character named Rip, who is a herald. And the reason I focused so much on the Dog Empire in the Darkway series is because Rip essentially crash lands on the Isle of Dogs. And I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a lot of characters from Murder of King Lear in the start of that book.
Oh, cool.
And it essentially follows after the Empire of Dogs has fallen. So the graphic novel, it follows the rise of the Empire. Murder of King Lear is kind of near the end, and then the book picks up at the end. And really the Empire of Dogs and the Isle of Dogs will only be present in the first book. The second, third, and maybe fourth, it'll explore different regions of the Darkway. But that book I'm pretty proud of. But I think one of your questions later is like, why did you decide to make a video game?
Yeah.
I do think it's harder to sell stories, to convince people to consume stories that are in the expected story format, which is a book. I think when I release my book, unless if I manage to get a publisher deal of some sort, it will most certainly sell even less copies than my games, which is kind of why I'm really pushing to make games. Because when I love making games, it's one of the few activities that really encompasses every discipline. But also because when you make a book, unless if you already have people who are interested or are an established author or manage to get some award that convinces people to pick your book off the shelf, the book industry is much smaller than the video games industry. And you are guaranteed much less success if you're just making a book versus a video game.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because a lot of times I hear authors who have made it, Carl Dinneman comes to mind, the like dungeon crawler Carl person, or is his name Carl? I might be making, I think it's Matt Dinneman actually. That's funny that I conflated his name. But anyway, I heard him speak at Emerald City Comic Con last year. And he was talking about like sales in this very, it sounds cutthroat to someone who's more kind of thinking artistically, but it's like so important because that's what, creatives have to do to survive.
Yeah.
But I can tell a difference between people who are in it for the creating or who are in it for the making money after they've had success.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to hear you talk about that as an impetus, potentially for like making the games, is just like trying to get more people interested in the world. Because I can still tell like the fascination that you have with it. Like all of the art is going to come out. It's just whether or not like you can survive while making it. And I know that that's something you have like chronicled a lot on your Instagram and other places where you're kind of like talking about your journey. But I was checking out the most recent update. I was playing it of Murder of King Lear, and I looked at like your patch notes. Mm-hmm. And it's cool. I hadn't realized that you're kind of like setting goals for however many like copies you sell as far as like building in features, but then also providing updates. Like if it keeps selling at this rate, I'll be able to pay rent and stuff. And I feel like your way of going about it is both practical in that you're providing those updates, but also like it's inspiring to me to see that you are able to, going back to the metaphor you mentioned earlier, like stand in that very dark tunnel or walk forward in that very dark tunnel while being able to continue to be passionate about your art. So I just wanted to congratulate you on that. It's a very hard thing to do. And I think it definitely endears people to you. It definitely endears me to you. So great job there.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. You're doing great. And I really appreciate you being here and sharing. Getting onto the game, Murder of King Lear is the game that brought us together. It's extremely visually striking. And hearing that you live in the Seattle area, I can see how our aesthetic sensibilities kind of come together in that way. Because there's a darkness to it, but it's also somewhat cozy. It's always kind of snowing. There are these spires. And obviously you're a dog detective walking around, which I love. Tells the story of a young apprentice trying to solve a king's murder. And I would love to hear you. We've talked about the world more. I would love to hear you kind of just give the pitch for my listeners as you try to reach that next goal of sales, but also just describing the game in your own words and telling the audience more about, the development process.
The game is a murder mystery that allows you to play as an apprentice detective, but you are not a normal apprentice detective. You have a special skill called insight, which is certainly not the core functionality of the game, but it is one of the more unique portions. It's kind of similar to Disco Elysium's multiple mental skills. And I pared it down to one thing because I was like, I have to keep the scope. But I really wanted the player to be a detective. I did not want it to be a handheld walk through the story sort of game. I wanted the player to have absolute freedom in who they chose to convict, how they went about collecting evidence, essentially forge their own golden path, which in some discussions with my more advanced game developer friends who've worked in the industry for quite a long time, they warned me that could be a double-edged sword because the players who took the good golden path would probably love it. They would probably find it to be one of their most favorite games because they felt like they did it right and they did everything and it was their job that they did right. Like they were responsible for succeeding. Whereas the players who might not take the best path would find a lot of difficulty and frustration. And I mean, I've certainly noticed that in the reviews. I've watched your and Jamie's review, and I was like, yeah, I can see that somewhat manifesting here. Because I give the player maybe too much freedom at times, but it was both strategic from a development standpoint, because the more freedom I give, the less handholding I have to do, the less quality of life features I have to implement, the less pipelined navigation I have to put in. But also, as a game player, I've always enjoyed when games give me that freedom. And I wanted to make a game that was in the vein of a game like Skyrim, where you could go wherever you wanted within the bounds of the world, of course.
It's fascinating as a prospect for a commercial indie game in today's day and age, where like I totally see how your developer friends response is, it's pretty spot on, because like the players who want to sit with a world and parse through it are going to be fascinated, because you do have to double back, you do have to find, you have to like read, it's Disco Elysium adjacent in that way. And when you do get to the end of sort of an experience like that, kind of a Return of the Obra Dinn comes to mind, which is honestly a little more handholdy than what you're doing, because you can like kind of guess the triads of answers and get like checked off for it. Yeah. But like experiences like that, like you say, really endure in the minds of players. And I think it's just so bold of you to have, like, as you said, there are some practical elements to it of like being able to stick with your scope because you're not building in those checks and stuff. Yeah. But it's an exciting creative choice for me. And it's definitely something that I've noticed in myself, as far as like week to week, I'll feel differently about your game. Like when we recorded, I was like tired, I was traveling, I was, not as ready to steep myself in the world, which is what you're asking as a creator. And I think that that's so bold and wonderful. And then like when I have more time to sit back, and like before this interview, I was playing it, and it's just like, it's the type of game where, in my opinion, even if you're not the master sleuth, even if you're not gonna like solve it, it's fun to just like go stand on top of a castle and like watch stuff, Yeah. And it is the type of game where I think a lot of folks who are not the master sleuth will have to find their fun. But I think for a lot of people, that's kind of the magic and majesty of games. So I think it's so cool that it's for people who want to solve that mystery, but it's also for people who just want to live in the world. Like you mentioned, actually, I wasn't thinking of this as a connection, but like the Skyrim connection is very apt, because a lot of people just want to like go stand in a cave in Skyrim, or like figure out what reading a book in Skyrim will teach them.
Oh, that was kind of a good pitch. I liked your pitch. That was good. I mean, yeah, it's a mystery game. It's a game where you can hang out and enjoy the scenery, but it's also a game that really requires a lot from the player. I likely could have made a better commercial title for my first game, especially considering where this game came from. I got furloughed and I was trying to get a job in the games industry again. I was working as an art director at Skypunk, which was a studio founded by one of the OG Rocket League devs.
Oh, cool.
A very awesome person. We're very good friends now, and he's taught me a lot. I probably would not have been able to make this game without his guidance when I was working with him. Sky, he is a wizard at Unreal. It's kind of absurd. But the game is like Skyrim and Disco Elysium. I think that is honestly the most apt way to say it, which makes sense. The game came out of, I was playing Skyrim, modded. There was this mod called The Great City of Winterhold, who the dude who made it, I actually reached out to him and I was like, dude, this mod is amazing. I'm going to make some art inspired by it. And he was like, cool, send it to me when you're done, or something like that. And I just made a map of a city. And I think you can go on my website and scroll down and you'll see the map. It's a pretty rough drawing of like a snowy city from the air. But when I finished that, I was still enamored by this idea of wanting to create my own Skyrim city. And there was this game jam coming around, and this was like pretty shortly after I'd been furloughed. And I was like, I need something for my portfolio that would get me another job. And so I thought, being a generalist, especially in indie industry, is very good because it shows that you have a wide range of skills that can be applied to many different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enrolled in that game company's story game jam or something like that. And I was also thinking a lot about Disco Elysium. I think I always think a lot about Disco Elysium. That game is just one of those sticky games that never leaves your brain.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, why is there no game that essentially takes a Skyrim city and makes it into a Disco Elysium sort of narrative where you can just hang out in the city?
Yeah.
And so I thought I could make the game in 3 weeks, and I could not. I did not make it in 3 weeks. I made it in like 9 months, working very long weeks.
Yeah, I was gonna say even that's a feat.
Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard. I did everything takes, I think, in game development 3 times as long. It's ridiculous. I think it's gonna take like a day to make all of the 3D models. It takes 2 months to make all the 3D models.
Yeah.
Because you have to rig them, and on Instagram people were like, "You used Mixamo, I can tell with that jump animation." And I'm like, "Yeah, I used Mixamo. I didn't have time to animate everything." I mean, in the future, I'm gonna look into, you know, those like body captures where you like put little dots on your arms.
Yeah.
My next game, Ultra, is a running game. It's like
cool.
Mario Kart trail running game.
Oh,
And
that's sick, dude. That
yeah,
sounds awesome.
I think it's going to be. I've been working on it the past 2 weeks and managed to get the networking set up. That was a crazy moment of elation when I had my friend join and I saw his character cube in game, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, it works!" But yeah, that I'm going to actually try and just get my friends and myself and animate us running with the dots. I need to do more research though and see how to actually do that.
That's amazing. Well, I can tell, your generalist skills are coming through and that you're going to do mocap and all the coding and the art, I'm sure. But yeah, that sounds awesome. We'll have you back on when that's out because I would love to play it and hear more about it. But sweet. That was a great pitch. Playing the game more, particularly from like, I think an earlier version to the update now. We've already talked about the art direction, which I think is spot on and hasn't changed much. I would love to talk more about just a couple of questions that came up for me while playing that, like, honestly, I wish I could ask you like while I was playing then. So this is actually perfect that this manifested. But I would love to talk about like the choice and idea behind like jumping and traversal, less the animations,
Yeah.
which I know you've already gotten some Instagram feedback on, but more like there's this idea of traversal like baked into the pitch and like the description that even you give on Steam. Stuff. Yeah, that like I'm fascinated by because I think it's biting off a huge extra piece of scope. In that, like, it could just be walking around talking to people trying to solve a mystery, but then you've built in these like little secrets you can find by like jumping on things that are hard to jump on, basically. That I'm interested in hearing about, like that choice and you're basically, it seems like there's a desire to put fun things in the game that almost is like, it's super audacious because it's like you're one guy. Like, tell me more about this desire.
Yeah, the game was originally going to be top down. Yeah. Because I wanted to mimic Disco Elysium.
Right.
But I designed the city first because I came off of that concept art I made of the map, and then I made a concept art for the houses, and then I put the houses all organized in Unreal. And then I tried to do the top-down template, and it didn't work. It just started clipping through walls, and you couldn't see where you're going. And I was like, I don't want to design the city for top-down. I want it to be for a Skyrim-like perspective, which Skyrim's first-person technically, but you can do third-person. And I was developing it a lot on Discord, just chatting with friends. And I noticed when I was just hanging out with them, I would just start jumping on the walls and stuff, which I've done that since I played Minecraft. I mean, you make little Minecraft parkour courses and you hop around on them while you chat with friends.
Yeah.
So really that's what the parkour and traversal element came out of, was this thought that, all right, I'm giving the players a lot of information. They're probably going to sit with it for a while. They're probably maybe even going to chat about it with friends. I don't want them to just click around on a map. I don't want them to just walk around on a map even. The most fun I have in games is usually when there's good movement and it's like an adventure element. And I've never really made a good movement game before, so it was a little rough on release because I was going with just tutorial based movement. But yeah, I really badly want to add more hidden things in the game that I just haven't got around to, because it's going to require me to completely rework the inventory system, because right now there's only 25 slots and you can't scroll. And if I add more hidden items, then I'm going to have to redevelop the inventory system. So I just haven't touched that yet. But the original intention was to have tons of secret items hidden around the game. And I have not done that yet. That's going to probably be one of the like stretch things. Yeah, that's kind of what it came out of, was just this desire to have a world you could hang out in and jump around, which maybe isn't the best reason from a gameplay standpoint, but from my desire as a player, I wanted that in the game I made.
And that's what also I think makes this a really unique project, is that like, even though it is a commercial project and you are selling units, you know, it's not a wild amount, but it's like you're selling to people are playing it. Yeah. But then there's also a whole side of it that seems to still be like your pet project, your passion project, which I just love, because it's not like, it's pretty hard to find these days. Like you're usually either on one side or the other of the spectrum, as far as like it's selling very poorly, but it's exactly what someone wanted to make, or it's selling a bunch, but it's like, you know, a publisher's marketing it and there's a lot of like kind of other hands in the pie. So I just think that, that's awesome to hear. Similar as far as like a choice-based thing that you included in the game is the voice acting. Mm-hmm. I love it. I think it gives a distinct like DIY feel. But like, I've definitely heard some opinions saying like it's not as polished as the rest of the game because you're not like paying professional voice actors to do it. I would love to discuss like that as a creative choice and like you doing a lot of the voices, what the process was and your interest in that kind of side of creativity.
Yeah, I watched Jamie's Let's Play and I saw the voices got turned off and I was like, oh no. But she's been the biggest voice detractor I've heard from.
I mean, I've seen some other reviews. I mean, people have been calling it quirky, which I think is honestly a very apt term to describe the voice acting. I made this game off of a furlough. So I wasn't getting any money. Greta really, my wife, my partner, she was really looking after for both of us financially for the entire time I developed this game, and still even a little bit now. I mean, the game is making money and I have more contracts coming in just thanks to the visibility of the TikTok and Instagram reels I've been doing. But like, I didn't have any development funds to do this, and I didn't have a publisher. I didn't have any sort of investment. So I could have paid voice actors, but I also think you hit the nail on the head in speaking about this as kind of both a passion project and a project that can earn me money, kind of somewhere in between. Because I know some people don't like the voice acting, but I almost love my game even more now, especially when the credits roll and I see the names of my friends and family alongside the characters that they helped bring to life.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, and there's a certain sort of charm to that. The love from those relationships. They wanted to see me succeed. They wanted
to see the game come to fruition. And they dedicated a lot of time. It wasn't as simple as just an hour of recording. Like, I'd sometimes ask them to go back. And the first few recordings I did, I actually had them come over to my place, and we sat for like 4 hours and recorded all the lines and re-recorded. And it was a long process and certainly not easy. And I know, like, one of the refrains that I've heard is like he could have spent his development time not doing voice recording and fixing all the bugs with the game, which, I mean, sure. But when I look at my inspirations, Skyrim and Disco Elysium, there are plenty of games that are story games that have no voice acting. One of my ones I'm playing right now that I'm honestly very impressed by is Sea of Stars by Sabotage Studio. No voice acting in that. Writing is impeccable. It's beautiful. I love reading and the little from the text box. Like, it's great. It works. But the inspiration for my games was voice acting. The reason Disco Elysium and Skyrim come to life so much is because they have these voice actors dedicating time to bring these characters to life. And in a lot of ways, by having my friends and family do it, they become a part of the world too. And it's not professional voice acting, but I don't know. I just have I have a greater appreciation for my own game now, seeing friends and family in the credits versus people I've talked with over email like a few times.
That makes sense. And as you've discussed, kind of going back to the beginning of the interview, like, it's always been a family affair to a degree.
Yeah.
And so that really resonates with me, and I think is probably, as spot on of an answer to kind of answer those detractors as you could have given. Because as I've talked about, you've kind of validated this is towing that line between, something that you need to sell a certain number of units, but then also like wanting it to be something that you can hold up in however long down the road and be like, this is the game I wanted to make. So
yeah, I do also think that the way that I approach game development in the first place, there's a lot of people I've interviewed with, a few companies like hiring, where game development is a means to an end, and that end being money. Like, they want to sell their business and company to make money. But for me, it's always been an extension of my art, which is, I think, was amplified working with Sky at Skypunk, because he is also very intent upon it being an art and not just doing the thing that's going to sell the best, but doing the thing that is the most inspirational from an artistic standpoint. And I think really, in this world that we live in, where purpose is so elusive and money can be so enticing, I think the best thing we as artists can do is hold fast to the things that inspire us and make us want to spend more time doing it. Live our life doing the things we want to spend our time doing. Because like, that's all there really is to life, is to try to figure out why we're here and do it to its fullest extent.
Yeah, couldn't have put it better than that. I would love to get back into just like the nuts and bolts of putting the story together. So there's a ton of writing in the game. You can tell, something like Disco Elysium is an inspiration because the lore is like baked into the character interaction, and you get a great sense of that. And it's a daunting idea as just a fan of like trying to get it all to fit together. Like, I imagine just this branching tree that goes like on into infinity. And I'm wondering, like, what was the actual mystery and story design of this game? Like, how did you work on getting it to all fit together?
It was a challenge. It was quite a challenge. I'll tell you my strategy, and then I'll tell you the difficulty. Obviously, I started with the city first, which, from a lore standpoint, I think is poetic in that the city is technically the oldest city in the Isle of Dogs. And the city began as a simple little drawing inspired by this mod for Winterhold in Skyrim. So I designed the city first, and then I decided to do the game jam. And I was like, I'll do a murder mystery. That sounds fun. And very quickly I realized it was quite difficult to make a murder mystery. It was my first murder mystery I made. And on a backpacking trip to this like little river area, it was the weekend and I brought my field notes with me, little notebook. And I was trying to come up with who are the characters in the city that could potentially be involved. And I made a list of 20 characters in my mind. 20 was not that much. It was actually quite a lot, especially when you have branching dialogue trees that just square themselves. And I had the king, I had the prince, I had all these other characters, but I didn't know anything about them. I had no idea who any of them were. I just had names, which I think is one of the unique things to my creative process is I almost always start with names. Almost always, which to the dismay of some of my other friends who I've worked with, they don't like I start with names because they don't know what those names mean. And I give them these very lore heavy names and I'm like, I don't know anything about this character. Here's their name. And they're like, what? Let's just call it Basic Enemy 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, I had a bunch of names and then I knew that it was called the King Mir. I actually started with the name of the game before I even knew what the game was about. I wrote Murder of King Mir on my whiteboard and I was like, that's the game name. I don't know why, but that's going to be the game name. So I knew the King Mir had to get murdered. After that, I decided who murdered him. I picked the character. And I partially picked the character off of what their name meant, which if you figure out the murder mystery, I encourage you to look up their name and what it means.
Good Easter egg there for folks.
Yeah, good Easter egg. There's actually a lot of meaning behind a lot of the names I picked. Some of them are just kind of basic, but there is quite a lot of meaning behind them. The next challenge was, how did this murder happen? And so I came up with the true murder. Like, how did the actual murder happen? I designed that. And then I was like, all right, what's one layer of abstraction we can do? I came up with one layer of abstraction. And then I was like, one layer is not enough. We got to have 2 layers of abstraction. So then I made another layer of abstraction. Like, this is actually not what happened twice. And then that was essentially the murder mystery designed. But I didn't have any of the characters written. I didn't know anything about them. So I kind of just started writing dialogue in a Google Doc. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote. Eventually, I got tired of writing in a Google Doc. And I just started, because I was running out of time, this is like 3 months until December, I just started writing in the Unreal Engine blueprint tree, writing directly into the blueprint tree. And my entire goal with writing the dialogue was expand the world as much as possible, try to make them fit in it, add as many twists as possible. So have every character have more than meets the eye and have increase the amount of probability that they could be the murderer by adding kind of suspicious stuff that isn't actually suspicious once you know the true ending.
Right.
Which I think increased the difficulty, but I know from reading the reviews, a lot of people enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Because they become suspicious of pretty much everyone and that everyone has more than meets the eye, which was a trick I learned from The Witcher, actually. The Witcher 3, they're very good. Their writers are extremely good in that they always add a twist that makes the story more entertaining to experience. And I tried to replicate that a little bit in Murder of King Hair, but obviously this is my first murder mystery, so I think I could do a better job in the future, but I think it was a good first try.
I'm excited to see if we get a murder mystery in another part of the Darkway. That would be interesting.
You will. There will be End of Empire, which is quite a long way from now, but it's going to be a co-op murder mystery, so you'll be able to play with friends.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. Great. Well, switching gears here to more general topics, just for folks who are listening, potentially feeling inspired by you, which I think would be very easy in my humble opinion. But if you could give some advice to like an aspiring creative, what would it be?
I think this is the same advice I would give myself now, because it's a good reminder. I think we live perhaps at the most uncertain time ever in human history. 1 year from now, everything could be different. And I think part of that is state of the world, AI, automation, rising costs. The future is more foggy than I think it's ever been compared to like a medieval peasant. The medieval peasant was probably more concerned with whether or not the rain would rain enough to get their crops to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like their yearly life. Like they knew what was going to happen. They were going to farm. It was going to rain. They were going to farm. Whereas now technology is advancing at such a fast rate that the entire purpose of humanity is getting called into question. So my advice would be stay. There's a word I'm looking for. Honestly, stay in the dark. Just sit in the dark. The dark way is the way. And what I mean by that is the way forward is very shadowed. And I think the best thing that we can do as creators is to keep adapting and to keep doing what we do best, which is to be creative and poetic and provide a narrative to the world that we're trying to live in. And also be willing to learn, always be willing to learn, because I think that's how we grow as humans too, not just as artists, is having an open mind that allows us to move forward. Yeah, I think the utmost goal of every creative should be to create, but I also think we need to be able to adapt, whatever that looks like, because I don't know if anyone knows what that looks like, because it's so shadowed.
Yeah, very well put. I feel like creativity a lot of the time, for me, particularly in games, just because it can be so varied a medium, and a medium that's big enough that a lot of people can connect on, as it can be like a balm for our time and kind of a hub of connection, which I feel like, is being demonstrated as we speak. So similarly, just for folks who like maybe have no interest in making games or being creative, but like they're players or they're interested in like appreciating or consuming art, what do you wish they could know about like developers like you whose art they consume?
I was also thinking about how to answer this question, because I'm essentially talking to the people who might be playing my game but are just wanting to experience it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very hard, because on one end I'm like, just play the game, just experience it. That's what I want to tell them.
Yeah.
But on the other end, I mean, they're humans. I'm a human, and I think to all humans who choose to experience art and the creation of another human, there's a range of skills out there. There's a range of indie developers. There's good games, there's bad games. But I think what we all need to do more of is to just be kind, because making games is hard. Making art is hard. It's hard to make something that resonates and that lands, and it's not always going to resonate and land. And the best thing we can do, I think, is to provide feedback to help all of us grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, be kind.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was gonna remark on at other points in this interview that I like kept for this segment to not like have it be too much of a digression is like, you've been so, resilient just as like putting something out there on an internet in a very uncertain time that like just loves like bashing things, or like,
Yeah.
like it seems like the only emotion that is like common, especially in like game reviews these days, is like anger or like criticism. And there's a place for criticism, but I think a lot of the like critics on Steam and critics on Instagram or whatever are just going to be like one sentence saying it's shit and like moving to something else that they can say is shit just to like, I don't know, like make someone feel bad. I don't know what the impetus for it is, but like there's such a resilience in putting yourself out there. And I think that being the message of like experience something, think your thoughts, and be kind with those thoughts is like exactly what I want this show to be, because I want it to be like hearing from the folks who a lot of people otherwise might just like write one sentence to on Instagram and like move on. And it's like, not only is, you know, Pierce the creator a person, but a person that has like so much to give and just wants you to like experience a thing and like be generous with your engagement in it, and like is so generous in giving that thing to the world. So that's something that's really important to me, and something that I want to continue to remind myself as well, is that like, you know, as a critic or as like a content creator in the game space, like apathy and saying something is bad is like easy, but trying to like look through the lens of the person creating it, but also like realize the texture that goes into creating something is so like valid and important. And so I really appreciate that answer. And
that's very well said.
It's a reminder to everyone. So just to wrap up here, 2 more questions. This one is, what keeps you feeling like nourished, and what keeps you going outside of games? Like any other passions, hobbies, time with Greta?
Yeah, I think I like 4. I'll go backwards. The 4th one is probably good stories. Good stories, good narratives to follow. And that includes things like Lord of the Rings, that includes other games. But I also think that includes real life stories that are inspirational. Like I mentioned David Goggins earlier. If you look at that guy's life story, like he's by no means a world record runner, but against all odds, he's managed to do amazing things with his life. And I think consuming media associated to beating out the inevitable is always a good inspirational thing to do. Also consuming media and essays and podcasts of people who really are in that kind of never doom mindset of it'll work out. We just need to keep trying and keep learning. I'm kind of in the stage of my life right now where I'm trying to figure out how to make what I want to make that is both valuable to the world and valuable to me. And it's a very difficult process. And one of the things that keeps me going through that is returning to, I don't know if you're familiar with Naval Ravikant.
No, I'm not.
He's an entrepreneur, but one of his big things is that every human has a unique experience and a unique skill that they can contribute to the world with. And that skill is something that they can then live off of, because it's something that only they are able to give through their unique experience. So whenever I'm kind of down and out and feeling like whatever I'm making isn't worth it, or whatever I'm trying to give to the world isn't valuable, I kind of return to that quote of, I just have to figure it out. I'll figure it out eventually. And I think figuring out action is a big part of figuring it out. And I think just keep continuing to act. Number 3 is the great outdoors and physical activity in the great outdoors. I mentioned I run a lot. I run a lot. I also backpack. I also kayak. I also ski. I'm going skiing tomorrow. Super excited for that. The world is an endless supply of inspiration. Pinterest is great. I love looking at Pinterest. There's so much great content on Pinterest, but it's just a little 2D square, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas the world it's the greatest open world video game ever made. You can go anywhere as long as you're not violating private property rights, and you can go run, you can bike, it's just such a beautiful, especially in Seattle, such a beautiful space to inhabit and to physically exist in.
Yeah.
And also the endorphins you get from physical activity are just fantastic as well.
Yeah.
Number 2 is friends and family. I've mentioned throughout this, but I think a big part of my creative process is my relationship to others, both the people who've contributed to my life, the people who I'm contributing to, and then the shared contribution of the things like the voice acting, I think really keeps me going forward. So, I mean, I try to meet up with friends for coffee at least once a week in Ballard. We go and just chit chat, co-work, get some drip coffee. I don't know. It's strange how simple things like that fill up my tank, but they really do. And then the number 1 is probably Greta, because without Greta, I probably would stay inside all day and not go outside and get the endorphins I need from movement. We've been together for 8 years almost. We started dating in high school, and she's really seen me through all stages of my creative development, from starting out as a teacher to then moving into wanting to be just an artist, and then a graphic novelist, and then wanting to do video games, and then getting a job in video games, and then losing that job in video games, and now making my own video game. And she's supported me through every step of the way. And I don't know how I feel. I don't know how people don't have such great relationships with their partners. Like, our divorce rates are so high in this world, and I just don't understand it, because I look at my relationship with Greta and I'm like, this is the best thing going for me. Like, we have so many great moments together. We enjoy so much of life together. In a lot of ways, she feeds a lot of my creative energies by looking at what I've made and being like, I really love this, this, and that. You could work on this, this, and that. What if you tried this, this, and that? And then also just the curiosity she shows in my creative process. She's a wonderful part of my life.
Well, an amazing answer. And honestly, my partner Jamie would 100% vibe and agree with you on the outdoors nature of things. She's a huge backpacker and just is in love with Seattle. So I know y'all would get along. But we've talked a lot of influences, so it's fine if you're just like Disco Elysium, Skyrim, The Witcher, all these things. But I just wanted to talk through this last question, like any influences you haven't mentioned on your creative process, specific works, artists, whoever.
I've mentioned Skyrim, Disco Elysium, Lord of the Rings. Everything Tolkien is a huge inspiration. Most of Stephen King stuff. Some of Stephen King's stuff, I'm like, I don't know if I like that book.
You have to be if you're a discerning fan with King.
I really loved his Dark Tower books. I think those are a big inspiration for me. I mean, part of the name came from them as well. Darkway, Dark Tower. I really love Hayao Miyazaki. He's probably one of my favorite artists. Bryce Coe, he was the artist for Sea of Stars. He was a big part of my creative development. I took one of his online classes, and low-key, he taught me how to draw. I would not know how to draw without him. There's other artists too, Jed Henry, Kim Jung-yi. There's so much. There's so many artists that I look up to. It's very hard to just compile it into this. Look at who I'm following on Instagram. That's a good read.
Yeah, and go follow Pierce on everything. Pierce, what would you say is the best way to like check out your work if you gave a number of channels people could do that at?
Ooh, I probably am most active on Instagram, but if you want the best content, I do have a mailing list that I send like an update to every 2 months, 1 to 2 months. And that is where I send kind of like my deeper philosophical musings, which I then also publish to my website under the sketchbook tab. But I try to be active on most social medias. I want to meet people where they're at. I don't want people to have to forsake their platform of choice for me. Whatever that means. I mean, the content creation's a bit of a hamster wheel. You just got to keep doing it. And
yeah. For sure. So what is the handle that people can find you at?
At EKPAP. It's my last name backwards, Ekpap.
Amazing. And I'll like include the URL to your website and everything in the show notes. And
cool.
Yeah, that should be good. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. I appreciate it.
Well, there you have it, folks. I was just struck by how wonderfully generous and kind and thoughtful Pierce was, in particular for the interview, but I imagine, that's kind of how he moves throughout the world. So I was super grateful to him for taking the time and sharing his thoughts with us. I also hope that he felt appropriately celebrated for sharing his art and being so resilient in the face of what I know can be an oftentimes brutal internet community. But that's what we're here for, right? We are rooting our joy in games and destroying internet apathy. So thank you for coming on that quest with me, and it's an honor to have pioneers like Pierce questing alongside us. I think we'll have a lot shorter of a tale on this episode just because the interview was expansive and I don't want to bore you with the sound of my voice, but thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed the show, please do tell just one friend about it. You'd probably double our listening audience by doing so. So I really appreciate it. And you can find Pierce's work on his website by searching Pierce Papke. You can find him on Instagram and a lot of other social media channels at EKPap. And yeah, that's kind of all I have to say today. Thank you so much for listening, like I said, and we'll catch up next time, okay? See ya.